It started with a glance. I was walking home from work when I felt someone's eyes on me. I turned around and saw a man in a hoodie standing in the shadows. He didn't say anything, but his eyes followed me as I walked down the street. I tried to ignore him, but every time I turned around, he was still there, watching me. It made me feel uneasy, but I told myself that maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe he was just a passerby who happened to be walking the same way. But then I started seeing him everywhere. He was standing outside my apartment building, sitting on the bench in the park where I went for my lunch breaks, and even following me to the grocery store. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was just going about his day-to-day life, and I happened to be in the same places as him. But the more I saw him, the more I realized that it couldn't be just a coincidence. He was always in the shadows, hiding his face. I never got a good look at him, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching my every move. One night, I was walking home from a late shift at work when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw the man in the hoodie, walking towards me with purpose. I tried to run, but he caught up to me quickly. He grabbed my arm and pulled me towards him. I could feel his breath on my neck, and it made my skin crawl. "You can't run from me," he whispered in my ear. "I'll always be watching you." I managed to break free from his grasp and ran home as fast as I could. I locked the door behind me and sat on the couch, shaking with fear. From that moment on, I lived in constant fear. I was always looking over my shoulder, always checking the locks on my doors and windows. But no matter how hard I tried to protect myself, he always seemed to find a way to get to me. He would leave notes on my doorstep or send me creepy messages on social media. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything. They said that without a clear description of the man, they couldn't do much to help me. It felt like I was all alone, with no one to turn to for help. I tried to move to a different town, but he followed me there. I changed my phone number, but he still managed to find a way to contact me. It was like he was always one step ahead of me, always waiting in the shadows. One day, I decided that enough was enough. I couldn't live my life in fear anymore. I needed to confront him, to tell him to leave me alone. So I went to the park where I knew he often lurked, and I waited for him to show up. And he did. He stepped out of the shadows, his hoodie pulled low over his face. But this time, I wasn't afraid. "What do you want from me?" I asked him, my voice shaking. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with those cold, dead eyes. But then he spoke. "I want you," he said. "I want you to be mine." I felt a wave of terror wash over me. His words made my skin crawl, and I knew that I needed to get away from him as soon as possible. But before I could make a run for it, he lunged towards me, grabbing me by the arm and pulling me closer to him. I struggled against him, but his grip was too strong. "Let me go," I shouted, my heart racing with fear. He didn't listen to me, though. Instead, he leaned in closer, his breath hot against my face. "You can't escape me," he said. "I'll always be watching you, no matter where you go." I tried to break free from his grip, but it was no use. He was too strong, and he seemed to be enjoying the power that he held over me. But just when I thought that all hope was lost, I heard the sound of police sirens in the distance. They were getting closer by the second, and I knew that I had to hold on just a little bit longer. "Let me go," I screamed, hoping that someone would hear me. And then, just when I thought that I couldn't hold on any longer, the man suddenly released me and ran off into the shadows. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air and shaking with fear. But even though the man was gone, I knew that I would never be the same again. From that moment on, I lived in constant fear. Every shadow, every noise, every stranger that I saw made my heart race with terror. I couldn't escape the feeling that he was still out there, watching me and waiting for his chance to strike again. In the end, the police were never able to find the man who had been stalking me. He seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving me alone with my fear and my paranoia. But even though he was gone, the memory of his cold, dead eyes and his whispered threats would haunt me for the rest of my life. I never knew who he was or why he had chosen to stalk me. But one thing was for sure, I would never forget the Shadow Stalker, the man who had made me fear for my life every day. And so, I leave you with this warning: be careful who you trust, and be wary of the shadows. You never know who might be lurking in the darkness, waiting to strike when you least expect it.